done, but I would like to, for a moment, act as if we're in a wagon train heading from St. Louis to on the Oregon Trail to Oregon, or perhaps breaking off of the Oregon Trail and going to San Francisco, and that we're children. And do you know how children were educated about history on wagon trains? Well, I'll give you an example. I was born about 10,000 years ago. There ain't nothing in this world I don't know. I saw Peter, Paul, and Moses playing Ring Around the Roses, and I'll whoop the guy that says it ain't so. I saw Adam when he stood at Eden's door. Eat the apple, I heard Satan's voice implore. And although you won't believe it, 'twas I who I'm sorry, wrong. And although you won't believe it, it was I who ate the core. I saw Washington at Valley Forge, I swear. Saw him toss the coin across the Delaware. And although you won't believe it, 'twas I that did retrieve it, 'cause $1 is $1 anywhere. That song is entitled The Ballad of the Wandering Jew.
Yep.
It has tens of thousands of verses, although from what I have read, only about 1,000 verses have really been discovered and recorded. So, but that was one of the songs that was used on wagon trains to teach history, especially of the American growth of America and the expansionism to the south, to the west. And if you noticed, it is rabidly anti-Semitic because it wasn't sung by Jews. It was sung by people who didn't like us, who wanted the history to be taught through our eyes, because we were the only people that they knew of that were around that long. And it fits right into the first person I want to talk about, who is Bronco Billy. Does anyone remember Bronco Billy? Yeah, a couple, okay. Bronco Billy is actually the very first cowboy movie star in America. He starred in 1903's The Great Train Robbery, and it was so successful that Bronco Billy, the actor, wrote and starred in hundreds of short films starring Bronco Billy, the character. But Bronco Billy's real name was Maxwell Henry Aronson, who in 1880, the son of a traveling Arkansas salesman, he was old enough to be highlighted in New York City, where he decided to stay, and he produced and acted literally in hundreds of films. He was as well known in America, at least as well known as the Duke, John Wayne, is known to most of us today. But Bronco Billy was a nice Jewish cowboy. And there have been many Jewish cowboys, but I do want to tell you a story. This is recorded in Flora Spiegelberg's oral history of women's diaries, letters, and original accounts of life in the southwestern United States. One day in the early 1870s, a band of 4 stagecoach passengers arrived at a stagecoach way station for a change of horses. 3 were Americans, 1 was German. After a brief rest, the station master spotted a band of Indians approaching the log cabin and yelled for the passengers to get back in their stagecoach. The Americans complied immediately, but the German was nowhere to be found. Finally, looking behind the log cabin of the station master saw the German passenger was rocking back and forth, praying softly, wearing a black kippah and a huge talit wrapped around his shoulders. Noticing the impatience and excitement of the passengers, the Jewish traveler calmly said, "Good friends, put your trust in God, and he will bring you safely to your journey's end." And miraculously, the station master reported, the Indians did not attack, and the stagecoach departed safely. And that made the rounds of all the Pony Express riders that were still around and the Overland stage line. Everyone knew about the miraculous prayer of the German Jew. I want to share with you, though, about one other young man. His name was Mala, M-A-L-A, and that was his only name. He was born in Alaska. He was the son of a Jewish father and an Inuit woman who converted to Judaism. And he was the star, the leading man in MGM's Last of the Pagans, which opened last night, according to a 1936 article in the newspaper, at the Philmart Theater. And he continued to act in Western movies for the rest of his life. And that was reprinted on March 6, 1936 in the B'nai B'rith Messenger, in case anyone here has ever been a member of B'nai B'rith men, or B'nai B'rith women. In 1886, there was a very strange article that appeared in the newspaper. Marcus Goldbaum had settled in Arizona in the mid-1850s. He had a son, Abraham. His nephew, David, was a longtime resident of Ensenada in Baja California and served as mayor of that city from 1927 to 1930. But one day, M. Goldbaum, Marcus, left the Benson, Arizona, and the June 11th American Israelite in Cincinnati, Ohio, remarked that Mr. Goldbaum was found murdered by Apaches 16 miles south of here just yesterday. It's a very strange story because he went out to prospect. No one ever heard of him again. And 2 weeks later, someone brought a body into Benson, and it was Mr. Goldbaum. So we have these little snippets that keep cropping up in American newspapers, many of them Jewish newspapers and periodicals. And then there was the amazing story of Dr. Aaron J. Messing. To the best of my knowledge, his progeny does not include as an actress who's alive today. In San Francisco, August 24th, 1888, Dr. Messing has had 2 bar mitzvahs last week, but he put his sanctifying hands on the top of the head of only one boy who paid in coin, while the other, though brighter but poorer, had to step down without a blessing. This is true, and I defy anyone to tell me to the contrary. Someday, when this boy takes an honorable seat among the money men, Dr. Messing will be eager to invent an excuse, but there were too many people present who saw that poor boy's shamed face and said, "Shame on you, Rabbi." This article is from the Jewish Voice of St. Louis on September 6th, 1888. So it wasn't just murders and altercations or meetings with Native Americans that made Jews famous on the frontier. Sometimes it was rabbis who were known for giving special services to those of wealth that they did not give on the same day in the same place to people without wealth. And I wonder, is there anyone here who has never heard a rabbi being blamed for giving preferential treatment to wealthy families in the synagogue? So it's not something new in the 21st century or the 20th century, but was well known even in the 19th century. How many of you watch HBO? Raise your hand if you watch HBO. A number of years ago, HBO had a very interesting television series, which I never watched, called Deadwood. And if you watch the series Deadwood, you know that the two main characters were the sheriff and the hardware store bar owner, whose name was Sol Starr, or Solly Starr, or better, Solomon Starr, who was a Jewish guy. Starr and a man by the name of Seth Bullock, who was a gunslinger and a really tough guy and bad guy, were business partners. They opened up a hardware business, and they would go from mining camp to mining camp, selling shovels, pickaxes, et cetera, things that the miners would need. But they were also, Saul was an entrepreneur. And so he started selling furniture and wallpaper, lamps, and housewares until in the city of Deadwood, he was elected postmaster. And he was postmaster for a number of years, 1889 to 1893, when he lost his job as he was charged with misappropriation of post office funds. It became a highly notarized article, which spread throughout the Dakotas and the Northwest United States of America, because here you had a Jew who was entrusted with the post office in Deadwood, and he absconded with money. In less than a year, he was tried and found not guilty. And the person who had charged him brought the charges to the sheriff, and then the sheriff brought to the judge, was a man who hated Jews, who had absconded with the money himself. So for a while, Saul was a persona non grata, until after he gave up his position as postmaster to stand trial, he was elected to the city council in Deadwood and eventually became Deadwood's mayor from 1893 to 1896. He was the first president of the Republican Party convention for South Dakota, as it was lobbying for statehood with the United States Congress, and eventually he became a state senator. When he died on October 10th, 1917, he and his partner Seth Bullock owned 4 major ranches and a couple of farms, as well as many of the businesses in downtown Deadwood. In Deadwood, 70% of all businesses were owned by Jewish entrepreneurs who had immigrated to the United States from Northern Europe. When he died, throughout the country, articles were written, "Funeral fit for the president," because so many people came out to hear the eulogies in memory of Solly Starr, and wealthy people were buying flowers and decorations for the whole street. And when after the funeral service outside of City Hall in Deadwood, his casket was placed on a wagon driven to the train station, and was transported back to St. Louis, Missouri. And if you, by the way, you can hear I'm a Midwesterner. So he was buried in St. Louis at the New Mount Sinai Cemetery. And if you so wish, the next time you're in St. Louis, you can use your GPS to get you to the New Mount Sinai Cemetery and go see Solly's grave for yourself. So not only were Jews present in the Old West, but they were really quite well known. I don't want to sing you a song this time, but I'm going to read you a poem which was written in the 1893 Congressional Journal. And that's the only place that we have a real record of it. It's the three stanzas I'm going to read are taken from the Ballad of the Battle of Beecher Island. When the foe charged the breastworks with the madness of despair, and the bravest souls were tested, the little Jew was there. When the weary dozed on duty or the wounded needed care, when another shot was called for, the little Jew was there. With the festering dead around them, shedding poison in the air, when the crippled chieftain ordered, the little Jew was there. This is actually one of the most famous Indian battles on the American frontier. For a while, it was up there with the Custer's Last Stand. It was so well known. 1,000 Cheyenne Indians, armed to the teeth, had surrounded a group of 52 Army scouts who were trying to scout a path for the next major movement of Colonel Forsyth's expeditionary force. 52 American scouts. And if they had only had 51, they would not have been able to leave. But it just so happened that in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, there was a ne'er-do-well little Jewish guy. I don't know exactly how tall he was, but probably somewhere between 5 foot and 5'1". He had never ridden a horse in his life. He had never fired a gun. He had, in New York City, failed selling baked goods on the street. He had failed doing all kinds of odd jobs. He failed running the cigar store in Leavenworth, Kansas. This guy couldn't do anything. So he figured the only thing he could do now was to sign up to be one of these scouts. And he walked in, and all these cavalry soldiers were looking down at him, giggling as he walked in to sign up. And he asked for enlistment papers, and the sergeant who was taking papers for enlisting said, "You want to be an Army scout?" "Well, yeah." He says, "Do you shoot well?" "Yeah, I shoot well." "Do you ride a horse well?" I've been riding a horse all my life." And question after question he lied about. And again, the soldiers in the room were all laughing. And they said, "Okay, we're going to test you. Come outside." They put him on a horse and said, "All you have to do is ride that horse at a gallop to the gate and then ride it back at a canter." Well, the horse started to run, and poor Ziggy Schlesinger fell off the horse. And that was the end. He couldn't get in, but he kept trying. And finally, the day came for the scouting patrol to leave, and they only had 51 men. Well, the paymaster said, "If you don't have 52, you are not allowed. We will not pay for the expedition." So Colonel Forsyth ordered everyone to go searching for that little guy. They picked him up, literally picked him up, and carried him, 2 men between them, from where he was to the command post of the cavalry there, and they said, raise your right hand. He took the oath. They said, you're now a cavalry scout. Here's your rifle. Here's your pistol. Here's your holster. Here's your saddle. Get your horse ready. And they dropped everything on the ground in front of him. He didn't know what to do. But there was one guy whose name was Pete, Tony Pete. And Mr. Pete had a big heart, and he offered to teach Zygmunt Schlesinger how to saddle a horse. So he saddled his horse for him. He showed him how to put the gun belt on, showed him where to put the cartridges, how to load the gun, put the gun in the holster, put the flap on, showed him where to load their single shot carbine rifle, showed him where to put it on the saddle, and then picked him up and put him on the saddle. Well, according to his journal, Ziggy Schlesinger could not sit down the first 2 weeks that they were traveling because, having never been on a horse before, he was saddle sore. All those muscles and tendons were stretched to impossible lengths for him. And they came to Beecher Island, which was a small island in the middle of a small river. And Chief Roman Nose, the main war chief of the Cheyenne Nation, surrounded them with 1,000 of his braves and swore to kill them all. And they attacked, and it was fierce, truly fierce. And it appears, according to Colonel Forsyth's notes and to the lieutenant who actually was the officer in charge on the island, Lieutenant Frederick Beecher, that Ziggy Schlesinger earned his right to be a scout that day, killing more Indians than anyone else, saving more lives than anyone else, and always ready to do whatever was needed. When a relief column from Fremont's army came to the rescue, no one believed the story. And when he eventually went home, was cashiered out of the Scouts after a dozen years, he was friends with people like Kit Carson. He was friends with someone named Bill Cody. And Bill Cody's coming back, don't worry. And he went to Columbus, Ohio, and then moved to Cleveland. And in Cleveland, he opened up a cigar store, a smoke shop. He said, I know this business. But he did well, and he gave tremendous amounts of charity. He was married. He had 2 daughters, and he was a wonderful man and one of the heads of the board of the synagogue at that time. And whenever anyone was in trouble and needed help, he was there. One day, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show was coming to Cleveland, and it was all set up. His daughters were getting ready to open the store, and there's a pounding on the door. And they open the door, and there's this big old guy with a long white beard and long white hair sticking out from a huge 10-gallon Stetson hat. He was wearing leathers with fringes. And he says, well, girls, I was told I could find Ziggy Schlesinger here. And he said, that's our father. And he said, well, is he here? And they said, well, yeah. And one of them runs to get him. And Ziggy comes out, takes one look, and runs and hugs Buffalo Bill. And the 2 of them are hugging each other, talking about being old friends. And it's been so long since they've seen each other. And Bill looked at Ziggy's daughters and said, would you girls like to go to the Wild West show tonight? And they were all excited. Daddy, can't we? And the whole family went to the show as guests of Buffalo Bill. And in the middle of the show, he stopped the action and asked Ziggy Schlesinger to come to the middle of the big ring and he introduced him as the hero of the Battle of Beecher Island to everyone that was there from Cleveland. And the cheers were phenomenal. And from that day on, no one ever questioned any of the stories that little Ziggy Schlesinger had of having been a scout opening up the western part of the United States of America. It's a wonderful story. If you're lucky enough and you Google the Battle of Beecher Island, you may find more verses to the poem and the complete report that was read into the congressional record about him. It just, it's really a fabulous, fabulous story. Now, have you ever heard of, what was her name? Because she was known as Sarah at first. Josie was her real name, Josephine Marcus. You know who she was? Robin, can you tell us who she was?
She was the longtime companion of Wyatt Earp.
She was the longtime companion of Wyatt Earp, or his wife.
Common law wife, yeah.
Well, there is a possibility that they were formally wedded.
Okay.
But it's under discussion. Some historians accept the document that shows the wedding. The one thing they couldn't produce was a ketubah. But there is a question as to whether or not Wyatt Earp may have converted to Judaism, because he's buried in a Jewish cemetery. The consensus is that no, he had never converted. However, we do know that he spent many Shabbatot and holidays in the synagogue in San Francisco to which Josie's family belonged. But when they knew he was coming, there was always a person at the door who would be waiting, and he'd say, "Welcome, Mr. Earp." And he'd put his arms out like this, and Earp would take off his holster and put it on this man's arms. He would take the holster, and in exchange, he got a kippah and a talit to go into services. Now, we've all seen pictures of Wyatt Earp. We've all seen different actors who have portrayed Wyatt Earp. Can you picture Wyatt Earp in a kippah and a talit? Yeah, it just doesn't fit, but it's true. However, there was a Jewish gunslinger, a well-known Jewish gunslinger, who is credited with at least 16 gunfights that he won, all of them face-to-face, usually in the middle of town for everyone to see. He was born in 1842 in Dublin, Ireland, to Jewish parents. His last name was Levy, and while he was still a young boy, the family migrated to the United States. And when he was old enough, he headed west. He landed in Peoki, Nevada, and worked as a miner. Oh, excuse me. However, his life would change on May 30th, 1871, when he witnessed a shooting in the street. Michael Casey shot a man named Tom Gasson, wounding him severely. Lying on his deathbed, Gasson bequeathed $5,000. This was 1871. That was a lot of money. $5,000 to the man who would avenge his death. At the coroner's inquest, Casey said that the killing had been in self-defense, but Levy testified that he had seen it happen and Casey had fired the first shot. Afterward, Casey tracked Levy down. He found him at a local store and challenged the unarmed miner to a gunfight. Accepting the challenge, Levy rushed off to get a gun, and he returned a short while later. In the alley behind the store, the two squared off. Levy called to Casey, and then as Casey turned and drew his weapon, Levy fired, grazing Casey in the skull with a bullet. When Casey dived at Levy, Jim fired again, hitting his opponent in the neck. As the wounded man began to fall, Levy hit him over the head with his revolver. In the meantime, a cohort of Casey's shot Levy in the jaw before running away. Though terribly disfigured for the rest of his life and losing several teeth, Levy survived and was arrested for Casey's murder. However, he was acquitted and released, and he also collected the $5,000 reward for killing Gasson's murderer. Levy eventually gave up mining and decided to make his living as a professional regulator, which was a vigilante law officer in the Old West. And for the next decade, he traveled from Virginia City, Nevada, to Cheyenne, Wyoming, Deadwood, South Dakota, Leadville, Colorado, and in Arizona, he spent time in Tombstone and Tucson. The terrible scarring did nothing for Levy's already bad temper. And during these years, it is estimated he survived 16 shootouts. One newspaper described him as, listen to this term, a pistolferous gambler. He was also accused of murder more than once, but was never convicted of murdering anyone. On March 9th, 1877, the most famous of Levy's gunfights, the Levy-Harrison gun, occurred when Levy argued with another gambler, the gunfighter by the name of Charlie Harrison. Gambling in Shingle and Lock's saloon in Cheyenne, the pair began to argue and it escalated quickly. Harrison insulted Levy, telling him that he hated Irishmen. Levy quickly took offense and challenged Harrison to come outside. Harrison was known in Cheyenne for his gunfighting skills, but Levy was an unknown. Most thought that Levy would be shot dead in a few minutes. Both the onlookers and Harrison underestimated him. The pair moved outside. They continued their verbal dispute, moving in front of the Senate Saloon before finally stopping in front of Frenchie's on Eddy Street. There they squared off. And as the two pulled their six guns, Harrison's shot went wild. Levy, on the other hand, took more careful aim and hit Harrison, who fell to the ground immediately. Though severely wounded, Harrison was still alive and taken to his room at Dyer's Hotel. A week later, he died. Levy was never convicted of murder. And later, this is the part of the account I found most amazing. Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp would use this shootout as an example to everyone who wanted to become a gunfighter, how calm deliberation was better than speed in a gunfight. So, and that statements like that are made in many movies about Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp. Now, I do want you to have an idea here. That picture is a picture of Jimmy Levy with his father when they first moved to the United States. Can you see it all right? And we have these photographs. By the way, how many gunfights he survived, we don't really know. Some people believe he killed as many as 32 men, which is an enormous number for gunfighters. When he died, he was gambling. It started again in a saloon gambling, and a gunfighter was not happy with him and challenged him to a duel. Levy was drunk, and he said, "I'll go get my gun." And he walked out of the saloon, was walking across the street to the hotel where he was going to go into his room and bring back his pistol. But as he was crossing the street, in the middle of the street, the man who had insulted him this time drew his revolver and shot Jimmy in the back. His friend was standing at the end of the saloon with a rifle and shot him a second time. Jimmy Levy got his wish. He died with his boots on, but not a weapon was on his body when he was murdered. Live by the sword. Albert Moses Levy was born in Amsterdam. He had he moved to the United States in 1818 and moved to Richmond, Virginia, like a good Jewish boy. He went to medical school. He later moved to the booming and raucous Louisiana town of New Orleans on the edge of the American frontier. And revolution was in the air in Texas. Seemingly a natural extension of the United States was reaching to be free. And Levy enlisted in the New Orleans Grays, which was a volunteer regiment that was soon to join the siege of the Mexican fortress of San Antonio de Bejar. And in 1835, the Army of Texas was poorly equipped, clothed, and fed. Morale at Bejar was terrible when they were reinforced by the Louisiana Grays and defeated the Mexicans and took control of at San Antonio. It was a terrible battle and many lost their lives. But this is the first certifiable example that we have of a Jew serving in the Army of Texas during the Revolution for Freedom. We know today that 225, at least 225 Jewish people served in the Army of Texas, several of them in the Alamo itself, who fought with William Travis, Jim Bowie, and Davy Crockett. Why did Jews fight for Texas freedom? Because this is not well known in the United States. Jews were not allowed to practice Judaism in Mexico, either under the Mexicans when they ruled themselves, or under the French who ruled for a long time. And so when Texas was fighting for its freedom from Mexico, it was a chance for Jews to find themselves helping to found a new country where Jews could live free. And so they were willing to accept the hardships, and they died, many of them, along with their fellow Texicans struggling for the freedom. Anyone remember Wagon Train? I want you to know, I can watch that 4 times a day, every day on there's a Western channel on INSP. And I still like watching the episodes with Ward Bond and Robert Horton. They're wonderful stories, well done. And every so often you get the story of Jews flung in there. But there was a major who was originally a doctor named Samuel Snow, who led one of the original wagon trains from Council Bluffs, Iowa, to settle in Placerville, California in the year 1850. And when they got to California, Samuel Snow became one of the founding members of the Hebrew Benevolence Society. And they bought a cemetery, and eventually they built a shul. And not only were our ancestors of the American West active in the American West, they were Jews. They were really Jews. They went to synagogue, they davened. And it's just, I am always amazed when I go over some of these stories that some of these really strong, tough people were so well versed Judaically. Has anyone here ever been to Santa Fe, New Mexico? No one? Okay. Did you go to well, sometimes it's called the Basilica. It was supposed to be, the Pope ordered a major cathedral built in Santa Fe in the late decades of the 19th century. And if you ever go there, where did I hide my phone? I don't have it here. I'm sorry. I put my phone down somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I was going to show you a picture of the front door of the Catholic Church that still exists after all these years. As you go to enter the door, it's two tall wooden doors, huge. And above them is a small half moon glass window. And in the stone triangle in the middle of that window are 4 Hebrew letters, Yud-He, Vav-He, which is the God's first name that God presented to Moses before the Exodus to Egypt. Okay. Why is it there? Because the Catholics couldn't raise the money to build the church. And they had an order from the Pope that it had to be built. They didn't know what to do. And one day, a friend of the Jewish owner of the general store in Santa Fe was talking to his Jewish friends and said, we don't know what to do. We don't have any more gold. We don't have any more silver. How are we going to build the church? He said, how much do you need? And he gave a phenomenal amount. It was several £100s. This nice Jewish guy used what was then the Jewish phone lines. He sent writers to the Jewish communities around, said we need to raise this number of hundreds of pounds of gold so our Catholic friends can build their cathedral. And it was raised. Within weeks, they had the money and it had already been brought to Santa Fe. Yud-He Vav-He is put above the entrance to show the friendship of the Catholic and Jewish residents of Santa Fe. But it goes further. If you take the tour of the cathedral and you walk in, halfway down the center aisle of the church, right in the middle of the church, on the left, on the wall, is a disc. There are lots of discs which are illustrating important parts of Catholic history. This one is weird. It's a big tree with its roots in the ground and its limbs blossoming in the air. And at the top of the tree is a red cross. At the bottom of the tree is a Magen David. This was put up.
No,
by
this is inside the church.
Inside the church, yes. And this was put up by the Catholic community to show the everlasting friendship of the Catholics of Santa Fe to the Jews of New Mexico. And I have to tell you, when we first saw that, Barbara and I were amazed. And when we heard the story, it was even more amazing. How could that happen? I have never made it to Tombstone, Arizona, but I want to someday because I want to go to the cemetery. There is a corner of the Tombstone Cemetery, which is a Jewish cemetery that was consecrated and sanctified by the Jewish community. And it's marked off within the cemetery. So everyone knows this is the Jewish part of the cemetery. And it's filled only with Jewish residents of Tombstone. Some of them were good residents. Some of them were no better than the residents who were in the other parts of the cemetery. But the amazing thing is, even in Tombstone, Arizona, named for its cemetery, there is a Jewish section that was consecrated officially, and everyone knew what it was, and it still stands today. Anyone have any questions at this point? No. Is any of this new to anyone? Oh, okay, then it's worth it. So
Rabbi,
yes,
we were in San Antonio, and we saw a church in the center of San Antonio, and high up on the church there was a Magen David.
I have to be honest, the only time I've been in San Antonio, I did not see that. But if you want, I will be happy to research it and get you an answer as to what it, or do you know why it was there?
I think there were some Jews there from France, and they could speak French, and I think one of the Catholic ministers there was a Frenchman, and there was a big friendship between them, and for that reason they put up a Magen David. That's what they explained to us when we were there.
Oh, very good. Well, you know what? Since we have another few minutes, if you don't have any other questions, I will give you a little tidbit about Jewish pirates. Who's the best known Jewish pirate in American history? Jean Lafitte. Now, when I was in college and I was a history major, I did some research into Jean Lafitte. And unfortunately, at that time, no one could prove he was Jewish. But there was a tremendous amount of thought that he was a Jewish pirate. And by the way, Jewish piracy goes all the way back to biblical times. And someday, if I have a chance to share more with you, I'll be happy to share you some information about Jewish piracy. The biggest haul on the Spanish Main was a Jewish pirate working for Captain Morgan. So Jean Lafitte was more a privateer than a pirate most of his life. He became a pirate because of the long history of what happened in 1492. And that's why most Jewish pirates became pirates during the days of the Spanish Main. Jean Lafitte was at the end of that period, but he loved the wonderful excitement of the life. If you ever want to know a little bit more about why he's so important to us, there's a fabulous movie called The Buccaneer. The original is starring, I can't remember right now, but the second movie, which was put out in 1956, was starring Yul Brynner as Jean Lafitte. Doesn't even look Jewish, I gotta tell you the truth, but it's a very interesting history. They were granted, because he fought alongside of Andrew Jackson's army and the people of New Orleans to defeat the British during the Battle of New Orleans, he was granted total amnesty by the United States government, as long as he promised he would never sink an American ship. He would never go to battle against an American vessel. And he never did, it seems, but one of the captains of one of his ships did. And like the good leader that he was, he took responsibility. And he was broken out of jail and he went back to a life on the sea. But what people don't know is after he left Barataria, an island just off of New Orleans, do you know where he went? He went to Galveston, Texas, and set up just off Galveston on an island there, his own domain, again, just like he did outside of New Orleans. And when Jews were not being allowed into Texas, he would allow them to come through his island and get them into Texas. Now, I don't know if there could possibly be any connection between my wife's family and Jean Lafitte's island on Galveston, because her family, a large part of them, came to the United States in the mid 1800s or early 1800s through Galveston. So we were always wondering about that. You never know. And with that, oh, wait a second. There are 2 chats that just popped up. Who's David? Who has the book on Jews of New Mexico? You're still muted.
Yeah,
There you are.
David Heck. Yeah, hi.
Hi, David. So what made you get a book on the Jews of New Mexico?
Well, it's kind of a long story. It was many years ago when online stuff was just getting started, and it was all pre-AOL. There was a service called Prodigy, and I signed up for an online baseball game. And I got randomly matched up with 9 other guys, and one of them had a Jewish name. So I reached out to him privately, and he was from New Mexico. And he was telling me the whole history of his mother, who his father was Jewish and his mother was Catholic. But when his mother was doing all this research on her family genealogy, she traced herself back to Spain, and that the family was actually originally Jewish. So that's when he went to the bookstore and sent me this book, The Jews of New Mexico.
Wow. He didn't live in Albuquerque, did he?
No, I think he lived in Santa Fe. Now he lives somewhere else, but I think he was in Santa Fe.
When I was searching for my first interim position, Barbara and I sent my application to a conservative congregation in Albuquerque. And I have to tell you, if it weren't so far away, we had Barbara's parents living in our home at the time. So we couldn't be a 9-hour flight away from them in case something happened. We would have taken that position. Beautiful little synagogue. Its building is on the National Register of Historic Buildings. And it's called, the name of the synagogue is not the name of the building. The building is called the Tent in the Desert. And as you're approaching the building, you're coming down over a hill. All you see is what looks like the top of a huge tent. And it's built to be Abraham's tent, with the 4 sides of the tent open, so that it's open to everyone who would like to come in. Just, it's amazing what our people do in unexpected places. It's just wonderful. So any other comments or questions? Thank you, David. No others? Then it's 12:56, and I will let you all go, unless Aliza would like to make any announcements.
Well, first, thank you very much for sharing with us lots of interesting stories that I certainly had never heard before. And just announce a couple more opportunities to meet Rabbi Ezring and interact with him. Zoom today from 4 to 5 is a pop-in type of thing. So he's going to be open to answering whatever questions you may pose, I assume within certain limits. He will be leading Minyan tonight at 5:40 online or in person, and delivering a Devar Torah at Minyan. And then tomorrow morning, there will also be a Zoom pop-in Q&A. So
thank you, Aliza. You've been so wonderful. I'll give you one more little tidbit. We all know who Levi Strauss is, right? What did he do? He created Levi's jeans, right?
No, he
Right.
created the rivets.
No, he created, all right, so Levi Strauss went west and didn't know what to do. And he tried a number of things that were unsuccessful until he realized miners needed some kind of heavy fabric. And so he created blue denim, or denim, and dyed it blue, indigo. But he provided this denim fabric to a guy who made clothes. The guy, I can't do anything with this. And one day his guy's wife comes to him and says, my sister's husband is working in the mines. It doesn't matter what fabric we give him, the clothes just fall apart after a day or two. He said, do something with this blue fabric you've got. It's indestructible. This is the guy who came up with the idea of the rivets and that made the jeans.
Mhm.
So how did it become Levi's? The guy didn't have enough money to create a large enough number of jeans to make it successful. So he he wrote to Levi Strauss and he said, I need money. And Strauss said, for what? He said, this fabric you gave me this great idea. I'm turning them into pants and overalls, and miners are wearing them. They never wear out, but I can't make enough of them. So Strauss agreed to buy the company. I think he started out as a 50-50 shareholder and eventually took over the company, or most of it. And the creator of jeans became the smaller partner. And so we wear Strausses when we should probably be wearing Stevens or something like that. So, anyway, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was
Rabbi.
wonderful.
See you
Thank you,
later.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It was so interesting.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was very nice.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.